It's 1942. A US submarine glides silently beneath the waves somewhere in the Pacific. A sonar operator stares at the screen, watching for enemy subs. But instead, he sees something impossible. A dense, solid-looking mass rising from the deep just 1,200 feet below them. It's not a mountain, it's moving. And it isn't just happening here. All across the oceans, sonar operators begin reporting the same strange readings. A false sea floor that slowly ascends each night, then sinks again by dawn. Was it an equipment malfunction? Long-term observations reveal something far stranger. Every night, billions of creatures, from microscopic plankton to lanternfish and squid, rise from the ocean's depths, forming a vast, pulsing wave of life. This is Diel vertical migration, the largest animal migration on Earth, happening not across continents, but through the ocean's water column. But why do billions of creatures risk exposure to predators every night? What unseen forces propel them upwards only to reverse at dawn? And what does science now understand about this massive global pulse, the Earth's greatest migration? Whether in the freezing poles or the balmy tropics, murky fresh water or the crystalline blue of the open ocean, underwater dwellers move in flux with the cycle of day and night. This movement from the sunlit surface to the lightless depths and back again is known as Diel vertical migration, DVM. It starts with something small. The still dark waters of the twilight zone betray no movement. Tentatively, a copepod, a tiny crustacean, zips upward. Then another and another, until a whole swarm of them furiously swim towards the surface. It's dusk, and small organisms like these copepods rise to the surface to feed. Under darkness, the copepods evade prowling predators such as large fish and whales that rely on vision to hunt. As morning breaks, they retreat to the safety of darker waters, avoiding the gaze of predators once more. Most plankton are less than an inch in length, and DVM involves traveling tens to even thousands of feet. This is not a once-in-a-lifetime odyssey. To these copepods and millions of other organisms like them, this is a daily occurrence. Twice daily, if you account for the return trip. As arduous as the distance is, it's not the only obstacle the copepods must overcome. The stirring of tiny organisms reverberates through the food web. Soon, these copepods will be pursued by a whole host of predators: squid, tunicates, fish, jellies. The migrations of DVM occur in intervals. As prey species move, predators, distributed along various depths of the water column, give chase. Migrators must navigate this gauntlet adeptly, seizing the opportunity to feed without running headlong into a lurking predator. This undersea dance of predator and prey creates overlapping ladders of migration in the ocean's depths. These moving intervals of predator and prey are the fundamental interactions that form the structure of oceanic ecosystems. In the performance of DVM, each organism must choreograph their movements carefully. Just one misstep could be a matter of life and death. Despite the massive movement that DVM represents, the first glimpse into this worldwide migration was a relatively calm affair. On a quiet mid-morning by the clear waters of a small lake, the naturalist Georges Cuvier watches tiny water fleas gradually descend into the depths, slowly vanishing from the surface. The determined movements of their little swimming legs carry them into deeper waters, an observation recorded by Cuvier as a vertical migration. This idyllic scene is the earliest known observation of DVM, albeit on a much smaller scale. Predating the use of sonar by almost 150 years, Cuvier published his book The Animal Kingdom in 1817. He describes the movements of water fleas living in the clear waters of a freshwater lake. By midday, the fleas disappeared from the surface, retreating into deeper waters. Only when the sun began to set would they make their reappearance, gradually ascending in the waning light of dusk. These movements were not random, but the result of the fleas actively seeking different depths. While Cuvier did not realize it at the time, his observations were a tiny glimpse into the rhythms that move entire oceans. But it would take a world war and a breakthrough in sonar for the full scale of DVM to be revealed. It wasn't until the invention of sonar in the 20th century that the phenomenon could be observed at a large scale. As observed by naval ships all over the world, the mysterious phantom landmass came to be known as the deep scattering layer. The strange acoustic signature was not explained until 1945, when oceanographer Martin Johnson proposed an explanation that would upend our conceptions of the deep sea. Once, the deep sea was thought to be completely lifeless. The vibrant life of the ocean was confined to the thin layer of water illuminated by the sun. Without light, no productivity could occur. Combined with immense pressure and freezing temperatures, the mid-water depths were surely hostile to life. Johnson was aware of discrete migrations, like those of Cuvier's water fleas. What if the deep scattering layer was a similar migration on a massive scale? After all, he noted, if the layer was composed of organisms, it should behave as many marine animals do, especially the plankton, and undergo diurnal migrations. So he tested it, and what he found changed ocean science. Over the course of one night, Johnson hauled up nets of plankton from specific depths. If the deep scattering layer was truly biological in nature, the depth of his hauls should correspond to the depth of the layer at a given time. His predictions were confirmed. The deep scattering layer was composed of migrating animals in masses so dense that they appeared to be solid. Far from being a dark void, the sunless waters of the deep teemed with life. Johnson's work revealed not a barren wasteland, but a complex ecosystem with important ties to the surface. Our perception of marine ecology changed overnight. Estimates for life in the ocean needed to be dramatically revised. Spurred by the discovery of abundant life in the deep, estimates of total marine biomass increased tenfold. If you've gone diving on a sunny day, you may have seen a flurry of tiny particles illuminated in the sunlight. This is marine snow, organic debris, the remnants of organic matter now whittled down by hungry animals and the currents into dust. Like glitter in a snow globe, these particles drift from sunlit waters, sinking into the shadowed depths. Though it may seem insubstantial, the constant shower of organic matter is a major source of nourishment for life in the deep sea, sustaining entire ecosystems of strange and wonderful life in the sunless waters below. In the cold and dark of the deep sea, the delicate fall of marine snow is embraced by many creatures. For some, these particles are the closest thing they will ever know of the sun. Sunlight in the ocean diminishes rapidly after around the first 600 feet. Within this thin layer of water, the processes that form the foundation of all ocean life occur. Phytoplankton, mostly microscopic single-celled organisms, are the primary producers of the ocean. Seizing carbon dioxide from the air, they photosynthesize, turning it into organic carbon, carbohydrates, amino acids, lipids, the building blocks of life. The amount of primary production in the ocean rivals primary production on land. Despite their tiny size, phytoplankton keep pace with dense jungles and verdant forests. The combined biomass of active phytoplankton is 1 to 2 billion metric tons compared to 600 to 1,000 billion tons of terrestrial plant biomass. Why this vast discrepancy? Simply put, phytoplankton are being eaten all the time. The most voracious consumers of phytoplankton are zooplankton like krill or copepods. The results of their messy feeding, leftovers or fecal pellets, form the majority of marine snow. While phytoplankton are often too small to sink on their own, the remains that zooplankton leave behind are often larger and heavier. In this form, the particles leave the sunlit surface. Let's follow a single particle as it drifts downwards through the water column. Starting from the euphotic zone, the sunlit waters where photosynthesis takes place, our particle glides into the twilight zone. Here, the last dregs of light barely filter through. In the twilight zone, from 660 to 3,300 feet deep, all but 1% of sunlight is lost. As the particle descends deeper still, the light is lost entirely. From around 3,300 to 13,000 feet, it will be swallowed by the darkness of the midnight zone. Anything past that point is known as the abyss, the expanse of deep sea floor containing the enigmatic geographies of abyssal plains, trenches, canyons, and seamounts. The particle becomes shrouded by darkness, vanishing from sight. With the exception of the last few decades, our knowledge of the ocean mirrored the particle's trajectory. Depths beyond the first few hundred feet of water remained mostly imperceptible to us. The portrayal of the deep sea as sparsely populated and isolated from the surface persists today. In popular culture, a common comparison is often made between the deep sea and the surface of the moon. Cold, barren, and profoundly alien, the depths of Earth's oceans are often perceived to be just as remote as outer space. But the deep sea is not isolated. Life links the surface and the deep in profound ways. As the study of DVM has shown us, millions of vital connections are forged between the depths and the surface every night. The particle continues to drift, but its path is interrupted. A krill, swimming upwards from the darkness, grabs the particle and eats it. This krill will soon be followed by a great wave of its companions. Soon, they'll arrive at the surface, where they'll feed on phytoplankton. Through this living means of transport, carbon is repackaged. The carbon within the original particle will take on numerous new lives. Respired as carbon dioxide at the surface, bundled into a fecal pellet and stored as part of the copepod's body until it too is eaten. This cycle of carbon from the depths to the surface and back again is known as the biological carbon pump. DVM debunked the notion that deep-sea organisms are only passive beneficiaries of the surface. While marine snow from the surface contributes greatly to life in the deep sea, the residents of the deep sea are hardly limited to being patient recipients of surface scraps. Through the motions of DVM, organisms living in deeper waters actively transport carbon beyond surface waters. Fecal pellets from zooplankton alone contribute around 40% of carbon exported from the surface across all waters. When conditions are ripe, migrators can be an exceedingly effective means of redistributing the ocean's productivity, sometimes accounting for over twice the amount of carbon transported by passive sinking. Estimates of the carbon moved by migrators are around 1 billion metric tons, about 2/3 of the carbon emitted by vehicles in the United States every year. Partaking in the ocean's productivity comes in different forms. Carbon can sink, but the organisms of the deep can also swim. Organisms like krill make up the core of DVM's elaborate machinery. Many migrators are zooplankton, ocean drifters that are carried by the motion of the tides and currents. Most are microscopic. On an equivalent scale, embarking on DVM as a human would mean completing a 10K race before and after dinner. Every day, these tiny adventurers brave perilous conditions until they reach the sanctuary of deeper waters. Making this journey is a test of endurance, especially for diminutive zooplankton. Depending on factors such as the temperature or salinity, the energy needed for DVM could increase an organism's metabolism by up to 300%. As they prepare to move en masse for the shelter of deeper waters, they may face a myriad of dangers, from the whims of the tides to the unforgiving jaws of predators. To understand the experience, let's imagine living it. Shed your human ideas about depth, distance, place, and time, and descend into the all-encompassing sea. Let's go on this journey as one of the most prolific migrators on the planet. Amongst the zooplankton, this one overwhelms by sheer numbers alone. This small but mighty creature may make up 70 to 90% of multicellular zooplankton found in waters all across the world. You are a Copepod, a crustacean so ubiquitous that you're nicknamed the cockroach of the sea. Your body is teardrop-shaped and transparent, with 2 legs for feeding and 4 for swimming. You have a single eye in the middle of your head, bright red like a ruby. It's flanked by 2 sets of antennae. The longer pair of the 2 elegantly arches outwards, almost as long as your entire body. You're small, but numerous and quick. In the day, you take refuge in sunless, deeper waters. Hovering in the dark, you dream of the surface. Just underneath the waves, a microscopic kingdom bustles with life. Strings of cyanobacteria spiral around one another in long green chains. The intricate walls of diatoms glint in the sunlight like fragments of stained glass. Dinoflagellates dart through waters using their 2 whip-like tails, while coccolithophores steadily drift through the waves clad in heavy shells. These are phytoplankton, performing the life-giving alchemy of photosynthesis. Using sunlight, they transform the inert minerals of the sea into sustenance. Zooplankton migrators depend on phytoplankton as a rich food source, and their presence draws you to the surface every evening. When you reach the surface tonight, you'll be voracious. With a relentless hunger, you capture cell after cell. You alone might consume over 300,000 phytoplankton in one night. DVM is a high-risk, high-reward endeavour. For braving the many dangers of the water column, you will feast. As the light fades, you, along with millions of other zooplankton, begin to stir. You'll be joined by numerous companions in your migration today, but that doesn't mean the journey is without danger. Being so small, your body is at the mercy of the swirls and eddies of the water. On previous journeys, you've seen others get caught in the pull of a water current. Like Dorothy, swept up into a hurricane and cast into the unknown, there's no way of controlling where you might end up. Unable to struggle against the unrelenting tide, they were simply carried away, far from familiar waters. If it happened to you, all you could do was hope that your new surroundings wouldn't be too different from those you were adapted to, but there's always a chance that you'll find yourself in a hostile environment. The movement of the water is not the only way in which the sea challenges your journey. The properties of seawater themselves might be obstacles. While larger creatures move through the water relatively easily, smaller creatures like you feel the drag of water on your body. To imagine an equivalent human-sized experience, it would be akin to swimming through molasses. Not all water is the same either. Though seawater appears homogeneous, its various layers are separated by density and temperature. Like oil floating on water, warmer water sits atop colder, denser layers of water. The temperature of seawater rapidly plunges as sunlight fades, forming a steep gradient that separates warmer and colder waters. For a zooplankton like you, this is like swimming straight into a sheer slope. The boundaries of this gradient often see sudden changes in water velocity and even its direction of flow. Imagine being greeted by a sudden rush of water in the opposite direction. That experience would at least hinder your journey. In the ocean, you can take nothing for granted. Even the whims of the water itself can prove an insurmountable barrier. No perilous journey would be complete without monsters. While migrating, you must evade the predators that either lie in wait as you surface or hope to actively intercept you mid-journey. While you attempt to evade visual predators, your movement can be picked up by tactile predators. Every stroke of your oar-like legs disturbs the water around you. Instead of sight, tactile predators sense these minute disturbances. Like a spider sensing a struggling fly in its web, they locate the source of these disturbances and zero in on their prey. On your journey, rousing their unwelcome attention would likely end poorly for you. As you travel upwards, you're flanked by your compatriots, unsuspecting of the dangers to come. Suddenly, a flash of movement, so quick that you might have imagined it. Your fellow travelers still swim upwards as they were moments ago. But were you flanked by only 3 on your left? You could have sworn there were 4. And weren't there more behind you as well? As a chill of unease sets in, the Copepod beside you vanishes, ensnared by a ruthless tangle of needle-sharp spines. This is a ketognath, a planktonic predatory worm that stalks migrating prey in the water column. Up close, you can see its nearly transparent body, which rendered it almost invisible. Long and dart-shaped, it moves in rapid bursts, lunging at prey with startling speed. Its head is covered in a tough, chitinous armor and flanked by long spines that surround its grasping jaws. These spiny appendages snap shut on prey with merciless precision, sealing their fate in an instant. Once caught in this deadly cage, the ketognath extends a flexible hood over the spines. This forms a trap that pulls their prey into their jaws where it's swallowed whole, much like the unfortunate Copepod next to you. Determined to escape, you and the rest of your group redouble your speed, leaving this terrifying predator behind. Through sheer luck and the relative safety of numbers, you've survived this harrowing attack. With the spectre of the Kurzgesagt behind you, you continue onwards. The steady beat of your swimming carries you near the front of your group. As you pass another individual, you notice something curious. The individual you just passed appears to be swimming in place. As you take a closer look, the frantic fluttering of their legs signals to you that there's something horribly wrong. You can see the thin, transparent tentacle clinging to the Copepod's body, holding it in place. It's over quickly. Abruptly, the captured Copepod stiffens, paralyzed by the tentacle's stinging cells. Its legs cease their rapid movement. Unlike the aggression of the Kurzgesagt, the predator moves with an unhurried grace. The tentacle slowly withdraws with the now unmoving body. Now you can see how it connects to a dozen others drifting through the water like strands of hair. These are the tentacles of a siphonophore. The siphonophore is a gelatinous filter feeder trailing along the water column to where zooplankton migrations are the most dense. Avoiding the subtle embrace of its tentacles, you swim upwards and along its slender body. The siphonophore resembles a ghostly plant. Root-like tentacles form the lower half of its body, while its upper half consists of a dozen transparent bells on a stalk, arranged like the blooms of an English bluebell. Siphonophores are colonial animals made up of individual animals called zooids. Zooids are highly specialized to a certain function: hunting, digestion, movement, reproduction, and assemble into a collective that operates as one organism. Among its tentacles, you can see the flared, tubular shape of digestive zooids. The bodies of recently captured prey are still visible, pressed up against their clear walls. Copepods, krill, fish larvae. You can even spot the ghastly visage of a Chetognath. The constant flux of the ocean means that you can never get too comfortable. Even the most fearsome hunters can be caught unawares. At this point in your journey, you're ever so close to the surface. But it wouldn't be wise to let your guard down now. The denizens of the Twilight Zone are masters of subterfuge, stalking zooplankton without ever betraying their presence. Once, you came close to being devoured. You didn't narrowly escape the distended jaws of a gulper eel or the gnashing teeth of an anglerfish, but an unassuming hatchetfish. Its disc-shaped body sliced through the water like a knife. Moving through the water without a trace, it glided upwards towards you from below. Controlling its own bioluminescence, it reduced the light emanating from its silvery body until it was no more than a pale glow. While you thought you were hidden well enough, the bulging orbs of its eyes are so sensitive to light that it could see you in nearly complete darkness. Only a few inches long at most, these fish are easy pickings for skilled hunters such as tuna or swordfish. But even the most harmless-looking creatures pose a threat to a humble copepod. You only detected the distinctive down-turned gape of its mouth as it hovered right behind you. Thankfully, you have survival skills of your own. Evolution has gifted the perpetually hunted copepod an incredibly fast escape response. The neurons that run throughout your body are coated in myelin, a fatty insulating material. As electrical nerve signals travel down the neuron, they skip over the myelin, allowing them to be transmitted rapidly. While the neurons of humans and other mammals are often wrapped in myelin, it's highly uncommon in invertebrates like you. As dread flooded your senses, The instinct to flee raced through you. Tensing and releasing like a coiled spring, your body propels you away from certain doom. Other copepods lived to tell the tale from far stranger encounters. Perhaps the most disquieting for you were tales of the basking shark. Many swore it knew to follow the migrations, that it specifically set out near dusk to stalk migrating zooplankton. Despite spanning 20 to 40 feet, it didn't hunt by chasing prey down. Instead of jagged teeth, it had a cavernous, yawning mouth, which it simply never closed. Slowly, it bore down on dense clouds of zooplankton. It swallowed tens of thousands of zooplankton in their entirety as the gill rakers within its large mouth filtered them from the water. The feet barely seemed to register with this great beast, placidly devouring all unlucky plankton in its path. Its massive size and implacable advance made it seem more like a force of nature than a predator, one that you hoped you would never encounter. Beneath you, you see a faint blue glow in the distance. As it gets closer, the light separates into tiny glimmering points. It's as if the night sky, blanketed in stars, arises from the deep. Then the sky descends upon you in a rush, and you brace yourself so as to not get knocked off course. You find yourself surrounded by a mass of fins and flashing scales right in the thick of a migration of the most common and widely distributed group of vertebrates on Earth. If you were to ask a creature on land what that vertebrate might be, they might suggest house mice or pigeons. After all, they live in huge numbers all over the world, having no difficulty thriving among human cities. The true answer would probably surprise most land dwellers. They likely wouldn't have seen this animal alive before, let alone as many as you do every night. The false sky is a school of lanternfish. These elusive, nondescript fish are relatively small, only 2 to 10 inches in length. They are fellow migrators and school in staggering numbers. Lanternfish are thought to comprise the majority of the biomass of the deep scattering layer, outclassing both swarms of tiny zooplankton and the hefty bulk of large predators like tuna or sharks. They alone represent over 60% of all deep-sea fish, with their combined biomass estimated at over 600 million tons across the world's oceans. The starry night sky of the deep emanates from the bioluminescent glow of lanternfish, their bodies adorned with shimmering photophores. Both their sides and belly are speckled with light-producing organs that emanate a blue-green glow. The light on their underside somewhat counterintuitively acts as a form of camouflage. Imagine a predator lurking below, looking up at a lanternfish illuminated by sun or moonlight. The lights on its belly mimic light passing through water, intermingling with the refracting light from the surface. Instead of disappearing into the darkness completely, the lanternfish shrouds its presence in dazzling light. While the lights on its underside cloak it from predators, lanternfish also have dazzling arrangements of photophores along the sides of their bodies. Like constellations, these arrangements are unique to each of the over 240 species of lanternfish. Each species performs its own elaborately choreographed light show, flashing in distinct patterns and rhythms. This suggests that lanternfish also use light to communicate, using their light to signal to others of the same species. Under the cover of darkness, millions of lanternfish speak to each other in the language of light. Thankfully, you're paid no mind by the school of lanternfish. They seemed focused on reaching the surface, just like you and the rest of your group. Soon after, you spot and capture your first phytoplankton of the night. Savouring the fatty lipids contained within its outer shell, you know you've reached surface waters. Your fellow copepods rush to join you, eager to partake in the bounty of the euphotic zone. You'll gorge yourself on phytoplankton until the sun begins to rise. You still have the long descent back into the deep, but at least you won't be doing it on an empty stomach. Countless other zooplankton join you for dinner. Some are microscopic, like you are. Others are much more noticeable. Rippling through the water, the 10-foot body of an undulating salp meanders past. Like beads on a necklace, the body of a salp is a chain of identical individuals. Each chain can be tens of feet long, sometimes organized into a winding helix or a giant wheel. Within this elaborate assembly, each individual is essentially a gelatinous, hollow tube. To move, they expand and contract the muscles that encircle their transparent bodies. As they move, they eat. Their movement pumps water through a fine mesh within their bodies that filters phytoplankton from seawater. The presence of this large colony bodes well for you. Salps rapidly form clones when food is abundant, adding new individuals at the end of the chain. Though an undiscerning eye might mistake them for a jellyfish, salps are separated from other gelatinous creatures like jellyfish or siphonophores by over 800 million years of evolution. Despite their simple appearance, salps are far more closely related to vertebrates like fish than they are to jellies. The family resemblance is much more obvious in their youth. Larval salps are free-swimming creatures that resemble tadpoles. They have a structure called a notochord, which develops into the spinal cord in vertebrates. However, they undergo a drastic metamorphosis, losing the notochord as they turn into their filter-feeding adult form. Salps might lead a simple lifestyle, but they exemplify living to the fullest. Large phytoplankton blooms spur clonal masses of salp that can cover hundreds of square miles in the ocean. Suffused with phytoplankton, salp can become so overladen with food that they break off from the chain and sink. Most of their number will disappear when the bloom is over, unable to sustain their explosive population growth. But tonight, you watch as this salp's body blazes with bioluminescent light. Like a comet shooting through the sky, its existence will be fleeting, but glorious. As early morning approaches, your feeding frenzy is nearly at an end. You and your companions are not concerned with cleaning up after yourselves. The water is thick with your leftovers, remnants of dead phytoplankton and zooplankton fecal pellets. But these scraps will not go to waste. A small portion might make it all the way to the deep sea floor, but most will be rapidly consumed as they sink in the water column. Some migrators take advantage of the abundant supply of organic debris, ready and poised under the oncoming shower. You can see a larvation hovering with an ethereal bubble-like structure billowing around it. This is its carefully constructed house of sticky mucus, woven by specialized mucus-secreting cells. The purpose of this bubble is to catch edible particles floating in the water column. The larvation itself, a small tadpole-like creature, is often dwarfed in size by its own house. But this diminutive animal has elevated the consumption of phytoplankton to an art. Using the current generated by its own tail, the larvation coaxes particles into the delicate walls of its house. The sophisticated structure concentrates food particles as they flow into it, sometimes up to 1,000 times higher than the surrounding water. Particles too large for the larvation to eat are trapped by external filters, while smaller particles are caught by internal filters that direct them to the larvation's mouth. When it becomes overburdened by its catch, the larvation casts away its house to build a new one. This industrious artisan may dispose of up to 26 houses a day, a testament to how effective its constructions are. These discarded houses allow the larvation to be a skilled architect of entire ecosystems as well. Larvation houses represent a significant proportion of the organic matter that sustains life in the deep sea. In Monterey Bay, California, it's estimated that larvation houses alone comprise about 30% of organic carbon that reaches the deep sea. As a copepod, you can't construct a house as elaborate as a larvation can, but you're content with benefiting from their creations. As your night comes to an end, it's time to leave the surface. Fortunately, the return journey is less effortful than the ascent. Instead of struggling upwards, you can sink in the water column, letting the density of your body carry you from time to time. Regrouping with your fellow copepods, you start your descent. It might be a little early, but you feel relieved at having survived another night. There's no guarantee that you will, but then again, there never is. You follow the migration back into the darkness without fear. Right now, you're alive and well fed, and that feels like victory enough. On our journey, we saw so many creatures join us in this daily migration. The question remains, how do they know to start their journey? Do they have signals that they watch for in the movements of the sun, sea, or those of other animals? Could it be an innate pulse, a biological rhythm that compels them to move each day? Researchers believe that the migration is synchronized by a complex mixture of environment and instinct, driving millions of organisms on their journey. In 1906, an Englishman named A. Moseley wrote a letter to the scientific journal Nature about a curious experience he'd had on holiday the previous year. On the 30th of August 1905, Moseley was taking a relaxing fishing trip on the idyllic waters of Slapton Lea, a lake on the south coast of Devon in England. He wasn't having much luck catching anything. At mid-morning, when the sun was high in the sky, the fish were barely biting. Then, the sky began to darken. Bit by bit, a great shadow blotted out the sun, plunging the town into blackness. The once calm water around Moseley's boat thrummed with activity. All around him, the water churned with fish, and they were utterly ravenous. Lure after lure was devoured as Moseley furiously reeled in fish as fast as he could. When the darkness gradually receded, Moseley was left with a sizable catch. Somehow, he'd caught more fish within the last hour than he had the whole morning. As Moseley realized at the time, the sky over Slapton Lea happened to be on the site of a partial solar eclipse. But what about it had sent the fish into a frenzy? Even over 100 years ago, Moseley made the educated guess of a practiced angler, writing, "The explanation, I presume, would be that the fish imagined night was approaching and therefore prepared for supper. As every fisherman knows, the last half hour when dusk is gathering is the time that fish are mostly on the feed." Moseley's observations show us that the sudden darkness of the 1905 eclipse was enough to cause DVM in the middle of the day. Like the fish of Slapton Lay, migrating organisms take their cues closely from light. Light filtering through the ocean's depths paints a spectrum of underwater lightscapes, each as distinct as a fingerprint. Phytoplankton bask in the sun-dappled surface, while the electric blue of bioluminescence glows in the darkness of the twilight zone. Each oceanic layer is suffused with light of varying intensity and wavelengths. While these gradations might be lost on us, the creatures of the ocean appreciate the subtleties of illumination. They demonstrate preferences for certain intensities and wavelengths of light. A preference for a specific isolume or light environment. The desire to remain within a specific isolume appears to be the foremost factor in DVM. To control light in your environment, you might turn a dimmer switch for the lights in your home up or down. To achieve the same effect, migrating organisms move themselves up and down the water column. Despite the elaborate scale of DVM, the entire performance is surprisingly fleeting and carefully synchronized. The majority of the migrations occur in the adjacent hours to dawn and dusk, suggesting that the practiced players of DVM take their cues with great accuracy. As the bright blue of surface waters slowly dims into inky blue-black, migrating organisms adjust their position in the water column over the course of the day. Even transient changes in light can provoke movement from migrators. Fish swam upward when a storm passed overhead, while a sudden influx of murky water spurred invertebrates to do the same. These bursts of movement show organisms in a dynamic waltz led by the isolume, guided by the interplay of light and darkness. Within the polar depths of the Arctic Ocean, we get a natural glimpse into how light orchestrates this massive movement. Cast in ceaseless dark in winter and never-ending light in summer, zooplankton migrations in the Arctic Ocean mirror the extreme seasonal flux in their lightscape. A harsh glare reflects off ice-capped waters even in the dead of night. In the Arctic summer, the sun never sets. The cruel light of the summer sun means there's no time that migrators will be hidden from the sight of visual predators. The daily mass migrations do not occur over the summer. Instead, zooplankton simply have to roll the dice, gambling with fate each trip as they hope to avoid the gaze of predators. There's not much else to do except rely on luck to survive. Conversely, the long winter months in the Arctic see no sunrise at all. Deprived of the isolume's guidance, some zooplankton enter diapause. This is a period of physiological dormancy, where they will simply suspend all but the most essential functions for life. In the absence of the sun's guiding hand, it was long believed that DVM came to a standstill in the Arctic's endless night. While some populations don't migrate over the winter, others adjust, taking their cues from other entities in the celestial sphere. Poring over 50 years of acoustic data, researchers in the Arctic noticed a strange pattern. Every 29.5 days, zooplankton descended in a giant mass to deeper waters. No matter whether it was in Arctic fjords, shelf, or open sea, the descent occurred like clockwork, coinciding with the appearance of the full moon. In the permanently dark Arctic winter, the grand cycle of migration occurs by the cold glow of moonlight. Without the light of day to guide their movements, migrating organisms adjust their migration to the lunar cycle instead. Migrations were not only attuned to the phases of the moon, but its nightly appearance as well. The daily migration still commenced regularly, only shifted to the lunar instead of the solar day. Even under the cover of sea ice, organisms waited for the glow of the moon to guide their movements. This was not an isolated phenomenon. In the absence of the sun, organisms all across the Arctic Ocean learned to dance by the moonlight instead. The long polar night sees no photosynthesis from phytoplankton. Without this means of moving carbon, the interference of these lunar migrators becomes exceptionally significant. The migrators and the predators that follow them become the only means by which carbon moves from the surface to the deep. While lunar light can stand in for the suns, what about when there's no light at all? Paradoxically, DVM still occurs in deep waters where light is extremely limited. To explain this, think about how you feel jet-lagged when traveling to another time zone. You feel wide awake even when it's the middle of the night in a different country, because your body feels as if it should be the daytime. If waking and sleeping were solely due to the presence of the sun, this wouldn't be a problem. But your body keeps time internally as well. This is known as the circadian clock, molecular machinery that helps organisms anticipate cycles in their environment. While you use yours to keep track of sleeping and waking, it appears that migrating zooplankton use theirs to keep track of when they should start moving. Just as you might awake to the insistent beeping of an alarm, the circadian clock makes itself known through bursts of gene expression. In copepods, levels of clock genes, with fitting names like clock, timeless, or clockwork orange, oscillate up and down. Their peak coincides with sunset or sunrise, synchronized with when copepods start migrating. These genes might cue the copepod's body to get ready for their trek as well. Copepod's metabolisms ramped up just before sunset, bracing for the demanding activity ahead. Even when kept in complete darkness in a lab, the copepods kept migrating. With information as important as when to begin DVM, the copepod's circadian clocks refused to keep them in the dark. However, every nightly migration sees a group of outliers. Not all individuals of a population migrate every night. This means DVM is not an inescapable biological drive or immediately triggered by the conditions of the sun and sky. More confusingly still, more animals appear to not migrate during bursts of high food availability, such as phytoplankton blooms. Why wouldn't animals want to take advantage of abundant food while they could? The surprisingly straightforward answer to that question is that they're simply not hungry. The fundamental trade-off of DVM is escaping predation while seeking food. If food isn't a strong enough motivation, animals could simply opt to not migrate. While this appears to be a simple explanation, testing this hypothesis is challenging. Krill kept in a laboratory were less active and swam less when fed. But a tank in a lab hardly replicates the open ocean. The chance to perform an ambitious natural experiment arose in 2011. In 2010, an explosion at the Deepwater Horizon oil platform led to the largest oil spill in history, pouring millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The environmental impacts were disastrous, and for years, marine populations in the area were regularly surveyed. In 2011, scientists monitored populations of deep-sea organisms by conducting trawl surveys. With samples from a range of depths being collected, this survey presented the rare opportunity to analyze migrations in their natural setting. In thousands of stomachs from both fish and crustaceans, animals that remained at daytime depths were much more likely to be at least partially full. Perhaps migrators could attribute their decision to migrate or not to a gut feeling. Besides hunger, migrators also balance the other half of the trade-off: the desire to avoid getting eaten. If predators lurk nearby, migrators abide by the adage, better unfed than dead. It was previously thought that the deep scattering layer was a chaotic mass of different species, moving at the same time. Instead, migrators move in groups of their own species. Distinct masses of fish, squid, and zooplankton rise in dense schools, ensuring predators cannot easily pick them off one at a time. The timing of migrations also depends on how easily a given organism can hide. Tiny migrators like zooplankton off the coast of Santa Catalina Island in California moved 20 minutes before sunset, while conspicuous animals such as fish only moved 80 minutes after the sun had set. In a world where survival hangs in the balance, adaptability becomes key. When hungry Risso's dolphins lingered in the shallow water, squid wisely remained at depth, postponing their migration by 40 minutes. But detecting predators isn't always as easy as seeing them. Thankfully, predators leave telltale traces of their presence. Plankton display an uncanny sensitivity to the invisible chemical landscape that suffuses the water around them, responding to chemical cues known as chiromones. Chiromones are chemical signatures for specific predators, alerting prey to their presence. In response, plankton engage in surprisingly sophisticated tactics to prevent predation. Some secrete noxious toxins, while others put up physical defenses. And for others still, it triggers the tactical retreat of DVM. Chiromones are such powerful indicators of a predator's presence that the predator itself need not be truly present to trigger a response. When exposed to water that previously housed fish, water fleas promptly fled to depths of their freshwater lake home. They were alerted to trace amounts of fish bile salts at concentrations so minuscule they'd be completely undetectable to humans. Without this exposure, they were content to remain at the surface to feed all day without migrating, free from the fear of being interrupted by a hungry fish. Vertical migrators, from masses of copepods to winding chains of salps, perform the complex calculus of deciding when to feed and when to avoid being eaten every night. The results of that calculation unfold as a migration like no other, unrivaled in its sheer scale and dynamism. Many of us know the ocean only by its surface, the comings and goings of its innumerable denizens hidden to us under the waves. The creatures of the ocean still move in rhythms we don't fully understand. Some move in reverse of DVM, rising in the day and sinking at night. Others move through the water column with the changing of the seasons. Nor do we know the full extent of how the oceans are interconnected. Large predators like tuna, swordfish, and sharks, once thought to be residents of the surface ocean, make frequent trips into the depths. While some dive in sync with the patterns of DVM, others defy it, plunging to depths of over 3,000 feet, far deeper than necessary for sustenance. Far from being a desolate domain, the deep sea welcomes many creatures, supporting their lives in ways we do not fully comprehend. The effects of human tampering with the delicate symphony of DVM remain elusive. With so many moving parts to each migration, it remains unclear as to how humanity's wide-reaching impacts will change it. The effects of climate change are heating sea surface temperatures. We're unsure if it will alter the composition of plankton that thrive in specific waters, change the amount of carbon transported to the depths, or affect the movements of millions of migrators. As we rely on the ocean's migrators to sequester ever-increasing carbon emissions into the deep, this is of great significance to untangle. But one thing is clear, every change has the potential to cascade throughout the oceanic ecosystem, sweeping through the unexpected connections that bind us all to each other. The biologist and writer Rachel Carson beautifully expresses this interconnectedness in her book, Under the Sea Wind. Under the Sea Wind began as an essay published in the September 1937 issue of The Atlantic Monthly. The essay itself was written while she was working for the US Fish and Wildlife Service, which was first intended to be a brochure for the Fisheries Bureau. Under Carson's hand, what was meant to be a summary of research was transmuted into a description of the ocean so lyrical that it intertwined science and poetry. Thus we see parts of the plan fall into place. The water receiving from earth, and air the simple materials, storing them up into the gathering energy of the spring as it wakens the sleeping plants to a burst of dynamic energy. Hungry swarms of planktonic animals growing and multiplying upon the abundant plants and themselves falling prey to the shoals of fish. All, in the end, to be redissolved into their component substances when the inexorable laws of the sea demand it. Against this cosmic background, the lifespan of a particular plant or animal appears, not as drama complete in itself, but only as a brief interlude in a panorama of endless change. Rachel Carson, Under the Sea Wind, 1941. The movements of migrators under the ocean connect what appear to be disparate settings: depths and surface, land and water, sea and sky. Many people would say they feel an inexplicable connection to the sea. Perhaps what we feel is a flicker of awareness of these connections being forged and how they encompass the life that surrounds us. At nightfall, when the living mass of millions begins their splendid dance, we too step along to their rhythms, whether we know it or not. Be sure to watch the next episode here, and if you want to unpack this episode again, save it to your YouTube playlist. Some journeys are better traveled twice.